Hey guys, so the next section that we do is going to be on conditional statements and biconditional statements. Alright, we're going to try to throw it into one section. A few things before we start. One, make sure you're taking notes. Remember, I don't grade if you watch the video. Even if you come into class tomorrow, you know exactly what was on it. If you don't have the notes written down on a piece of paper for me to see, you don't get the grade. Alright, two, this section is going to be all writing, okay? All your answers are going to be sentences. Some of them you're going to have to write multiple sentences. It's not going to look like math. Right, so if I start to go too fast, pause the video, make sure you get everything written down. These notes that you take now, you will be using tomorrow in class, so make sure you have them. Alright, so to start off, we're going to talk about a conditional statement. A conditional statement is simply a sentence that's written in if-then form. Alright, so the if is your hypothesis, so if this happens, and then your then is the conclusion, so then this is going to happen. Alright, so I could write if it is raining, okay, meaning the raining part is the hypothesis, then I need an umbrella. Okay, so when you look at this, the part that comes first, the part that's after your if, that's your hypothesis, and then the conclusion is what happens if that happens. Okay, another thing to note before we move on and practice this is P to Q. That is really important because everything else we learn is going to be in terms of that. So if it says P to Q, that means you're just general conditional statement. So the P is your hypothesis, the Q is your conclusion, and that's the order that it goes in. So if we scroll down, all right, write the conditional statements. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the sentence it gives us and we're going to write it in conditional statement form, meaning put an if in there, put a then in there somewhere. All right, so this says all lions are mean. So if I were to write the conditional statement, I would say if the animal is a lion, then it is mean. Okay, and notice one thing that I did. All right, this part right here, the whole animal part, that wasn't in the original sentence. We want to make sure when we're writing these sentences that they grammatically make sense, okay? Don't give me a sentence that I read it and it doesn't make sense or I don't know what it means, okay? Don't just literally throw the word if and the word then in there. It has to make sense when I read it. So the next one, all even numbers are divisible by 2. So if I write that in if, then I'm going to say if the number is even, then it is divisible by 2. In the third example, all right angles are 90 degrees. So I would say if it is a right angle, then it is 90 degrees. Okay, so all that was taking a sentence and turning it into a conditional statement, which again is P to Q. All right, so what we're going to talk about now is what can I do with a conditional statement. So when you have a conditional statement, there are 3 different types of statements you can pull from it. So the first one is called the converse. All right, so if I have a conditional statement, I can take the converse of it. All that means is that I flip it, okay? So that is the simple way of putting it. And then if you look up here, like I said before, it would always be in terms of P's and Q's. So the conditional statement was P to Q. This one's Q to P. So all you're going to do is you're going to take the sentence, and the if part you're going to put at the end, and the then part you're going to put at the beginning. So it says if a number is even, then it is divisible by 2. So I'm going to flip that, and I'm going to say if a number is divisible by 2, then it is even. All right, so see what I did there? I just took it and I just put it in the opposite order. So the words stayed the same. We just took the 2 things and switched them. All right, so that's the converse. Converse means to flip. The next one we're going to look at is an inverse. Okay, so the inverse is simply the opposite, all right? So that little squiggly symbol right there, that's called a negation sign or a negation symbol, okay? So if you think about it, if we take the negative of a number, that means we do the opposite. So the opposite of 2 is -2. Same thing here. So when we do the negative of something, it's just doing the opposite. So what you're going to do is you're just going to add the word not to it. So it starts off with if a number is even, so we're going to change it to if a number is not even, then, and you're going to do the same thing with the conclusion, so then it is not divisible by 2. So the order stays the same, you just add the word not to both the hypothesis and the conclusion. All right, notice another thing that we could have said here. Instead of saying if a number is not even, well, we know that the opposite of an even number is an odd number, so we could have said if a number is odd. I probably like that way better, actually. All right, if you would have put not even, I wouldn't have counted off, but I would have preferred you to say odd. All right, start to notice what that means when you take the inverse of that or you take the negation of that. All right, so again, this one, add not. First one, the converse, you flip. Inverse, you add the word not. All right, so super simple. And then you've got the contrapositive. All right, what you're going to do there is you're going to do both of what we just did for the converse and the inverse. So the converse we flipped, here we flip. The inverse, we added not, here you're going to add not. All right, so it says if a number is even, then it is divisible by 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if a number is not divisible by 2, then it is not even. You could have also said then it is odd. All right. So those are the 4 types of statements we have. We have conditional, we have converse, inverse, and contrapositive. So what we're going to do now is we're going to combine all that because that's what most of your homework problems are going to ask for. It's going to give you a sentence and you have to give off 4. So this one says if I do my homework, then I will pass. I'm going to be lazy. That is our conditional because it's already an if-then form. Right? So we don't have to change anything. That is it. All right, for the converse, what we have to do is we have to take that and we have to flip it. So remember the converse was Q to P, or we flip. All right, so I'm going to say if I pass, then I did my homework. All right, next one is the inverse. Remember when we did the inverse, that was where we added the word not, and that's where it had the little squiggly. So not P to not Q. All right, so if I look at this, so if I add the word not to this, if I do not do my homework, then I will not pass. All right, so we're keeping the same order, we're just adding the word not to both parts of the sentence. And then we have the last one with the contrapositive. We're going to do both of those. All right, so one shortcut that I use is in order to do the contrapositive, what I do is I add the word not to whatever my converse was. All right, because if we think about it, our converse is already flipped, so it's in the order that I need. I just need to add the word not to it. So I would look at my converse, okay, and it says if I pass, then I did my homework. So I would put if I do not pass, then I did not do my homework. All right, so that's the first part of the lesson. We're going to have a little bit more after this, but make sure you have this written down, especially these little shortcuts right here. That is super important for you to remember. Okay? Eventually it will become second nature, all right, but make sure you have that written down. That way tomorrow when we do this activity in class, you can have that next to you to refer to. Very last thing we're going to look at is called a biconditional statement. So a biconditional statement is a statement that you can write in the form of if and only if. Now, one thing to know is that we don't like to write more than what we have to, so this is how we say if and only if. We put IFF. So when I write these sentences, if we do a biconditional, I'm not going to write if and only if. I'm going to write IFF. All right, so one thing to note about a biconditional statement is the converse and conditional statements must both be true. Okay, so you'll understand what that means a little bit more in a second when we do these examples, all right? But if one of those statements isn't true, you can't do the biconditional. It just doesn't exist, all right? So there are cases where it won't exist. So we're going to look at this first example. If two lines intersect to form a right angle, then the lines are perpendicular. So that's our conditional. So we look, okay, is our conditional true? So if two lines intersect and make a right angle, do we call them perpendicular? Yes, that is true. All right, so then I'm going to look at my converse. So we have to make the converse, which means we have to flip it. All right, so if I make the converse, it would say if two lines are perpendicular, then they intersect to form a right angle. Okay, so we look at that. So if two lines are perpendicular, does that mean that they intersect to form a right angle? Absolutely. So they're both true, so now we can go on to write our biconditional. So what I'm going to do, when I write this biconditional, I'm going to cross out if, and I'm going to change the then to the IFF. All right, so our biconditional, let me change colors here. Our biconditional would be two lines intersect to form a right angle if and only if. So IFF, the lines are perpendicular. Okay, so a biconditional statement is a statement that is true both ways. So from the beginning to the end and the end to the beginning, which means you can flip it, so that's where the converse comes in, and it still be true. The next example says, if I play basketball, then I am an athlete. So we look, okay, if someone plays basketball, does that make them an athlete? Yes. Then I look at the converse. So when we flip that, I would say, if I am an athlete, then I play basketball. All right, we look at that. Is that true? No. You can play any other sport, right? So you can play football, you can wrestle, you can play tennis, you can do whatever. It doesn't have to be basketball. So when we flip it, it's not true. Therefore, there is no biconditional. All right, so this is an example. Remember, when we prove something wrong, we only need to find one example where it doesn't work. It doesn't have to not work multiple times. If it doesn't work one time, then the statement's not true. So for this one, because I can find a sport that makes them an athlete that's not basketball, then there is no biconditional. All right, so guys, that is the end of the notes. Make sure you have these written down. Make sure you bring them to class. You will be using them in tomorrow.